Yes, it's true. Most people have no idea how much rent can be charged in California. We're talking landlords, renters, real estate agents, armchair attorneys, those next door app experts that chime in. No clue. Not enough people know about the price gouging and rent protection laws in place in the state of California, or they get them all mixed up when they're trying to figure out rent increases or rental rates. In this definitive guide for renters and landlords, we're going to clear up the confusion and explain exactly how much a landlord can charge a renter, whether you're an existing renter in place right now or you're a new renter. We've been covering landlord and renter laws for a while in the state of California. In fact, if you Google up AB 1482, you're probably going to find my face. I don't know if that's something to be proud of. The first big question is, are you a new renter or an existing renter? Are you moving into a place for the first time, or are you in a rental right now? We're going to explain for landlords and renters how much rent can be charged. Starting with a new renter, what can a landlord charge that new renter for a new tenancy? And I know this thing might hurt your eyes a little bit. If you can be more creative and help out, feel free to reach out and make this prettier. The very first question that a landlord or renter must ask for a new tenancy, for a new rental is there an emergency order in place that would trigger Penal Code 396? That is the price gouging law. And right now, because of the LA wildfires, this is much more in the news than we've had in a long time. But just to let you know, Penal Code 396 started in 1994 after the Northridge earthquake, so it's been around for a while. If there isn't an emergency order in place, so the answer is no, there's no cap on the rental rate for that new renter for a unit that was vacant. So the landlord can charge whatever the market will bear. If it's an affordable housing unit, there may be a cap on what a landlord can charge. But other than those units, there's no cap. Now, if there is an emergency order in place, then we have to dive in to the Penal Code 396, the price gouging, to figure out what a landlord can charge. And there are people all throughout LA right now. It also has trickled into Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino. They're affected by that same emergency order and under the price gouging rules. The next big question is the unit been leased in the past year before the emergency declaration, or did it become vacant after the emergency? So if the answer is no, it hadn't been leased, then the maximum rent that could be charged is 160% of the HUD fair market rent for the bedroom count in that particular zip code or area. And then you can add on 5% of it's furnished. Higher comps do not matter. So if in the neighborhood things are renting for $15,000, but you do the math and you can only charge $9,000, that's it. That's all a landlord can charge. So that is very important to understand, and we released a video on that. You should definitely check that out. So if a unit becomes vacant after the emergency, and the landlord is going to rent it out again, the next big question, was it remodeled beyond normal wear and tear? So if the renter moved out and the landlord just put in, maybe did a paint job, maybe replaced some flooring because it was worn out, in that case, the landlord has not remodeled beyond wear and tear. So the maximum rent that can be charged is 10% over what the last renter paid. And if they decide to go ahead and furnish it now and it was unfurnished before, the landlord can add 5%. If the renter moves out and the landlord decides to upgrade the unit, so maybe new bathrooms, kitchens, put some money into the unit, there is a chance they can charge more than just 10% over what they charged the last renter. Here's the legal language from the legislation. It does say that a landlord can charge more, but I recommend discussing with an attorney. Now over here you see in pink a little asterisk, and it says local rent control. So there's one unique provision built into Penal Code 396. If there is local rent control, so for example, in LA, they have the Rental Stabilization Ordinance, the RSO properties, and those have very strict regulations related to how much rents can be increased. If a renter moves out of one of those units and it's vacant, the landlord has a choice, and the landlord has a choice between one of the two of these, whichever happens to be higher. So it could be 10% over what was last paid by a renter, or they can use that same math, 160% of HUD fair market value. And don't forget, we're real estate brokers. The way we keep the lights on is by selling real estate. If you know of anybody looking to buy or sell in SoCal, make sure you reach out. All right, now the rental increases for those who are existing renters. You're not going out there to find a new place, you're living in your place. How much can a landlord increase your rent? Well, you start with a very different first question. The first question a landlord or renter asks to make sure that rent increase is legal is the rental unit that is going to have the rent increase subject to or exempt from the Tenant Protection Act, otherwise known as AB 1482. We've released a bunch of content on that, and I encourage you to check that out to see whether a property you're living in is exempt or subject to AB 1482. Quick version is most duplexes and larger are subject to AB 1482 unless they're newer than 15 years old. And many houses and condos are exempt from AB 1482. So let's move down that pathway. So the answer is no, this property is exempt from the Tenant Protection Act. Now what's the next question? Well, it's a familiar question because it's the one we did for new renters. Is there an emergency order in place? Penal Code 396. If there is not an emergency order in place and the property is exempt from AB 1482, there is not a cap on that rent increase. A landlord can increase the rent as much as they want, as long as it's not considered retaliatory. The important thing to note too is that a 30-day notice will be used for any rent increase that's 10% or lower. This is the only category where you could have a higher than 10% rent increase in a 12-month period. That would be a 90-day notice. If there is an emergency order in place and it's exempt from the Tenant Protection Act, there is a 10% cap on the increase. That's the maximum the rent could be increased, and that would mean 30-day notice. The only way you could possibly have higher than a 10% increase for an exempt property that is under an emergency order is if that was in writing before the emergency order was declared. So if there was a lease that had a 15% increase and then the emergency order happens and then that 15% increase goes into place, that's okay. All right, moving back up to the top. So let's talk about all the properties that are subject to the Tenant Protection Act. The next big question, once you figure that out, is there a local rent control ordinance? That is the big question. Many areas have them. For example, LA City, LA County, Santa Ana, San Francisco, Santa Monica. Yeah, there's a long list. You need to know if there's a local ordinance in place that sets how much the rent can be increased. So if there is a local rent control ordinance, then the maximum rent increase, not tough to figure out. It's what the local ordinance says. And you need to stay up on that because it can change, as we've seen, for example, LA City RSO, rent stabilization ordinance properties that can go up or down or be frozen. If there is not a local rent control ordinance and it's subject to AB 1482, you are capped within a 12-month period to a maximum rent increase of 5% plus the consumer price index, and that's capped at 10%, can't go higher. And this is it, and we'll release another video showing the new rent increases when we have the new CPI numbers. But right now you can see broken down here that no county in all of California is at that 10% level through July of 2025. These are the rental increase amounts. LA OC 8.9, Riverside San Bernardino 9.3, San Diego 8.6, Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, San Fran, San Mateo 8.8. And if I didn't call your county, you are 8.8. If you subscribe to our channel, you are going to get the updated numbers when they come out. And remember, we can't give tax or legal advice, but for the most honest and up-to-date real estate advice, subscribe to this channel. Want to take a closer look at these flowcharts we put together? Subscribe to our free weekly email newsletter, and we'll deliver these gently to your email inbox, plus other updates you need to know. Thanks for tuning in. This is Christian Walsh, real estate agent with Wire Associates, and we can't wait to help you.